Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today. I just realized I'm wearing a PlayStation shirt, so yeah, it looks like I'm repping the home team today, I suppose. But we're talking about one heck of an interesting game today, and to get to that very interesting game, we have to go back to January 2024, where Palworld was coming out. Now, for those who don't remember, Palworld is basically Pokemon with guns, although there's some more to it than that. You get to actually enslave these monsters, have them do your bidding throughout your village. You have to take good care of them, and they'll continue to do their bidding, but sometimes they might get mad with you and just ignore doing their job completely, and that's while you're out there with your gun shooting other monsters and raiding dungeons and mining for materials. And so it's a mixture of Pokemon mechanics and survival mechanics, and people really loved it. It went on to see over 25 million players, and since then there's been an announcement of a collaboration with Terraria, which is coming next year. And on top of that, this game's about to receive a brand new island, which is said to be 6 times bigger than the original in the game. Palworld also recently just dropped on PlayStation, but more noteworthy is that Palworld is being sued by Nintendo. Now, Nintendo has claimed that Palworld has infringed on 3 Japan-based patents that Nintendo reportedly amended to specifically target Palworld, stating that they would want roughly $30,000 along with blocking Palworld's release. Now, these patents were established around the time of Pokemon Legends Arceus' release, which was at the top of 2022. Now, interestingly, it had nothing to do with what people were initially talking about during Palworld's release, which is its creature designs and animations. It actually had everything to do with running around an open world and being able to use a ball to catch monsters. Anyway, this release will be relevant at the end of our conversation, but the too long didn't read is that a big platform holder took issue with another developer flying a little too close to the sun by bringing a game to market that features roaming a field and throwing balls to catch monsters. But I also think that the level of success and attention it saw rubbed Nintendo the wrong way enough to make them go chase after this. The other TLDR is that this is happening more and more frequently, and I think the industry is going to respond strongly to this sooner rather than later, so stick around to the end for thoughts on that. But for now, it's time to introduce to the world who maybe missed this, Light of Motoram? I don't know. Motoram is what we're going to call it, though, which makes Palworld, in my opinion, look innocent by comparison. I do want to open up by saying this is not a video designed to be a rallying cry completely against this game. I'm not trying to fence ride. I have my own thoughts. I'll share them at the end of the video. But what I want the front half of the video to be is just strictly informing you. Like, what is this game? What are the similarities people are saying? And with that information, if you don't give a damn and you want to go play this game because it's free to play when it comes out, by all means. But at least you know. And that's what I think half the battle is. I will just say, this is why I have a retro gaming channel, Retro Rebound. Please check it out because I can only tolerate so much of modern gaming with this type of BS. And so, yeah, I need to sometimes cleanse myself of that. Anyway, Light of Motoram is a free-to-play survival MMO where they say, quote, nature meets machine. It's coming to PC exclusively on Steam and Epic Game Store. They're also planning to come to PlayStation, and it's by Tencent subsidiary Polaris Quest and developer Aurora Game Studio. First off, the promotional art. This is identical to Horizon, and it's a ripoff so blatant that the reality is they just do not care. A lot of people are like, how could they do this? Wow, the guts. I'm like, they just don't care. You do this type of thing when you just don't care. But it's also the world space, right? You see that it's machines roaming around nature, and a lot of these machines evoke a similar design that you would see in the world of Horizon. Now, a lot of people are freaking out like, how could they do this? I don't know if this is a good time for me to say this, but why do we need so much Horizon, and why do people like Horizon so much to rip it off? I'm not saying it's bad. I love Zero Dawn. I have yet to play the sequel. I've heard some good things about it, but I wasn't really super interested in it. And then there's a Lego game, there's a League multiplayer game. Now we got a rip off. I'm like, what do people see in Horizon that I don't? Maybe I got to play the sequel and really redevelop that love for it. I thought the world was cool. The plan for survival, if you will, was a cool reveal. But I also felt it was the beginning of noticing a lot of PlayStation trends with their open world design. And also we started to see like this was the trend where you would scan an area and follow footsteps that Andromeda went on to do and Witcher went on to do. And just so many other games had this similar mechanic, but I felt like Zero Dawn was at the peak of that. Anyway, there's a lot more than Horizon here. In fact, I think the more blatant ripoffs are from other video games. Some of them are more like nods that people, I think, creatively be like, oh, I know where they were inspired by or wanted to borrow from heavily in that instance. But some are, I think, directly taken from certain games, as I'll point out here. So in the camp of like, oh, this is inspired by, and I think you could get around it, is you can see in the initial reveal trailer, you have this sort of machine that's flying around. It's in a decrepit kind of post-apocalyptic situation, and then it revives you. And it's kind of the same situation as what happens with the ghost in Destiny 1's opening, where you have the ghost floating around, checking all of the machinery, and then they find you and revive you, and they're like, hey, we gotta go. I will say the music, particularly in the reveal trailer, very similar to Horizon. But funny enough, what goes around comes around. Palworld, some similarities here as well. You can see the new little machines. I think some of the designs are actually kind of cute. I don't know if they're in Forbidden West at all. I haven't seen anything like this, but there was like this little duck machine kind of wandering around. I went, oh, that's kind of cute. I kind of like that. But anyway, you can summon these machines to help you in combat. And just like in Palworld, you'll summon these machines to then go out and take care of your little village while you do other survival things. So it's kind of hilarious, again, that like this game that was known for copying another genre blatantly is now being copied. It almost feels like this is a game where someone went to AI and said, can you make me a game design document featuring the most popular games of the last 5 years and spit it out? And that's what you kind of got here. Anyway, I think you could put that in the same camp as like, oh, inspired by like Palworld's doing this thing where you get creatures and then you put these creatures in your camp and let them take care of things, and now you see this game doing it. Like, this is a thing. Okay, whatever. Where I do think it gets more blatant is actually in From Software territory, down to boss movesets. In particular, one moveset with the big gorilla boss that they showed in the 16 minutes of gameplay is straight up Godric. Like, straight up, it's Godric. And I was looking at it going, dude, I mean, I don't even know what to say. But even the attack animations are identical. The shield up with the spear and the same exact style of poke. The jumping sword falling down animation, you see that in the boss fight. That's also identical in my eyes. They even have the stagger and backstab animations. The dodge roll is eerily similar. The movement while locked on, I'm not going to hit them too hard for because I've seen a million games do that. It is like a staple of, oh, we want to make this sort of Souls-like experience. Our camera's going to operate this sort of way. Our player movement's going to operate this sort of way. But to see the animations fly that close to the sun, I went, to me, as someone who's played pretty much every FromSoft game, that was pretty blatant. That was pretty gutsy in my eyes. Worse yet, though, is I think the boss set moves being taken. That, to me, to be frank, is the epitome of low creativity. That's just saying, like, we don't know how to design a boss. We don't know how to make it interesting. So we're just going to copy from the playbook of the company that does. If you've played Breath of the Wild, I think you'll also see very familiar things here. For example, when you see in the 16 minutes of gameplay, the characters taking care of their village and they go out to this little section full of machines that's just a little bit ahead of their camp, and you'll see the way that the camp is set up, where you take out your bow and arrow. The ranged attack UI looks very similar. You see the stamina meter again, looks very similar. Camera positioning, also similar. There's an explosive barrel that happens to be nearby these enemies, kind of like it's similar to the Bokoblins, where they have the explosive barrels that you would use to take them out. And then there happens to be a chest afterwards. That, to me, is another hint of inspiration. Very similar design, though. Very similar execution. And there's also the glider that you would see in Breath of the Wild. Another thing that I'm not going to hit this game too hard for, because I've seen tons of games since Breath of the Wild come out and say, hey, we got a glider and it functions similarly, and you'll see that same stamina wheel. So I do think, in fairness, there are some things that this game has borrowed that some people are going hard at them for that they weren't going hard at with other companies. But at the same time, this game has borrowed so much that everything is being put under a microscope, and it's exponentially worse. So for me, Too Long Didn't Read is, I think, the most egregious borrowing is, universally speaking, probably Horizon, but really it is the From Software animations, and clearly they also borrowed from Monster Hunter. But that's the information, okay? You can kind of draw the line there. You have the information. I'm curious what y'all feel about this. I've seen most people kind of laughing at it. Most people saying, like, hey, it's a game from China. We're not really too surprised based on their copyright laws and just how they operate over there. And I get all of that. Where do I stand on this? We'll draw that line there. For me, I do think it's pretty ridiculous. And I don't take real issue with what I call blender games. That's my self-made term for a lot of games we see nowadays. Like, we're at this point in creativity in the games industry where we've seen a lot of great ideas, and now we're trying to figure out how to put the most unlikely ones together, or the combinations you never really thought of together, and just see what weird video game babies you can kind of make out of it. We're in that phase, and honestly, some of my favorite games are that. I think of last year, arguably my game of the year, Lies of P. Right? Like, that is a Blender game, and you see all the From Software inspiration, but you see a little Final Fantasy in there. Like, you see a lot of games in there, and I think it's great for it because you can feel the creative inspiration there, but it also feels very much individualized. Like, you see a little bit of parrying from Sekiro. You see a little bit of that aggro-focused gameplay from Bloodborne, but the world space, the way it's inhabited, the way you explore it, the move sets you get, all of that is original and unique in my eyes. And so it makes those borrowed mechanics that are then iterated upon a lot more interesting, like with your puppet arm and the different tools you can get. Kind of similar idea on what Sekiro had, where you had the prosthetic arm and you could change out different tools for different boss fights. So yeah, again, the similarities are there, and I think Blender games are totally fine. Where I worry is you'll see games like Lies of P, which manage, I think, to iterate enough upon established ideas, create their own story, their own world, and really deliver on those elements where you can see they're part of a genre. But then I look at what Nintendo's doing, where they're overextending with legal action because a game that had similar mechanics to theirs had a lot of success, and they took umbrage with that and used an amended patent to go after the game after its release. We've also seen companies like Warner Bros. Establish copyright for video game mechanics like the Nemesis system, which really sucks because we haven't seen the Nemesis system outside of what Monolith's working on, and now they're doing a Wonder Woman game. We don't know what's going on with Wonder Woman, and that mechanic could just die with WB. If you look at how their games division is doing, Suicide Squad, Multiversus relaunch, like all of these have done awful. Wonder Woman is in development hell to our understanding. Like, there's been a lot going wrong there, and so that is the issue with heavily protecting your ideas, is they live within the boundaries of your company. If you could use them, I guess fair play. You came up with it and you're going to make it your identity. But now you see what's happening with WB, where it's like, oh, it's going down with the sinking ship. But to my point, it's the legal action that is limiting creativity, where I do think Palworld is kind of egregious in its creature design, which is funny enough, again, what Nintendo's not going after them for. But Palworld also has a lot of cool, fun ideas that I wish Pokemon would do. And instead of iterating and evolving, Nintendo decided to try and sue Palworld, which is just ridiculous to me. And to be frank, I do think Sony will attempt some type of legal action on Tencent, but the long-term play here is the one that I'm really thinking about, which is that I think these larger companies are going to start to swing their legal arm around a lot more freely to make examples out of people, likely smaller developers, to prohibit this kind of thing from happening on such a large scale. And I worry that copyrighting creative ideas will become the norm in gaming to avoid this stuff entirely. Whether it be mechanics or worlds, I just worry about how far these companies will go to legally protect their ideas, because the reason we are where we're at with the games industry is because you get the copycats that make the genre better, right? If turn-based just stayed, for example, with, say, Square Enix or BioWare in a sense with Baldur's Gate and whatnot, we would not have the RPGs that kind of mix all of these elements together of like action and role-playing and make something really special out of it. You wouldn't probably have like your Witcher 3s, for example. So I'm not trying to fearmonger. I don't know if it'll ever get that far, but I think it's just food for thought because, as I'll talk about in a moment, gaming as a business is growing. But that is the result of all of this. Gaming is becoming a massive business, and it's bigger than all of us ever imagined when this little hobby really gained traction in the 90s. People are just not making games to experiment, discover new ideas, and satisfy some creative hankering they have. They're making games because for many, it's about making money, and there's an easy way to do it, or there's a hard way to do it, both of which I don't think require further explanation from me. Palworld and Light of Motorum are just the start of what I think will be continuous attempts to blatantly borrow established ideas, easily catch market interest by both ways of shock and familiarity, and then cash in on launch. And then I also feel this is a good time, again, to let people know about Tencent and how they do have their money in a ton of developer pockets. They are quite literally the biggest game publisher in the world, far bigger than Nintendo, Sony, Xbox, Valve, you name it. They have a 30% stake in Larian, a 40% stake in Epic, a 16% stake in From Software. They own all of Riot Games. They have an 11% stake in Ubisoft. the developer of Path of Exile, Grinding Gear Games, they have an 80% stake in. Remedy has a 14% stake. Platinum Games has a stake in them, though it's an undisclosed amount, and I imagine it's quite large since Platinum Games is likely going under. Paradox Interactive, 10%, and Activision Blizzard at 5%. This is a company who has a reputation of meddling in creative affairs, and now they're becoming, as a publisher who owns these sorts of companies, a little more bullish in what they will enable. I'm not attempting to rally against the game because that's not my vibe. That's not what I do here, and I imagine those of you who actually watch my content know that about me. But I do encourage you to inform yourself and vote with your wallet. For me personally, I could see myself playing this as a joke, kind of like the day before. Like, let's see how bad this really is, right? Or let's see how ridiculous this is. Let's keep an open mind. Could this actually be great? Let's just keep an open mind to it all and see where it goes. But I can't really, as someone who loves the industry for its creativity, shrug this off and be like, because I do think it's a misrepresentation of the argument of iterating upon ideas by saying, well, games have always done this. It's like, again, I go back to Lies of P versus an Elden Ring, or even a Bloodborne, if you want to draw a closer comparable, which I think was the true heart and soul inspiration of a game like Lies of P. You know, it also addressed a market need. There hasn't been anything like Bloodborne since Bloodborne. So it was great for Lies of P to come around at the time it did, before a Bloodborne remake or a remaster or a Bloodborne 2, whatever it may end up being. To me, Light of Motorum doesn't really look like, oh, you know, based on the promotional art, the trailers, the story beats, the mechanics. It doesn't look like it's taking any of these ideas and attempting to move them forward. It just looks like it's saying, hey, these are popular. We think you like these things. We're going to put them all together. Please play our video game. And for many people, they're going to say like, hey, that's cool. That kind of strikes the right chord with me. And to that, I say more power to you. Like, again, my goal is not to try and shut down video games. I believe in an open market that kind of just goes out there, does its thing, and we kind of let the people decide. If this is what you want to support, go ahead. If this isn't what you want to support, go ahead. We've seen that with plenty of games in the past. So I just try to encourage information at the end of the day. And hopefully y'all can get behind that one. But nonetheless, those are some thoughts on Light of Motorum. In the end, pretty blatant ripoff. Again, I think FromSoft's getting the worst of it in the terms of like, I've seen that before. But universally speaking, poor Horizon, right? You see they're launching next to popular Zelda games, time in, time out. They just can't seem to escape it. And now they're having someone eat from their lunch plate. So this poor series just continues to get taken advantage of. Hopefully with the next million entries of Horizon, I forgot to mention earlier, the remaster, they'll catch some fire again, and you know, they can continue to lead the charge in this machine nature environment. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got for you. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down below on this game. Fire away. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.